Entering the Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, part 2 of the wide receiver player-by-player profiles. We're talking about ADP, where we would have them in our rankings. We don't have the official rankings, at least I don't, released yet, but my guests do. We'll get to them in a second. Before we do that, smash the like button for the episode, and in the comment section, tell me which player right now from ADP, let's say 12 to 24, you think should be going inside the top 10 this season in 2020 fantasy football drafts. Also, subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast and leave a 5-star review while you're at it. It takes like 10 seconds. It's the currency of the show. Helps us out a ton. Chris Meaney is still in studio with me, as he was for part 1. You want to find part 1 and all the running back profiles, you hit the description of this show and you can do it.
Yes.
You excited to talk more receivers?
I am, yeah. As we talked in part 1, just briefly, it's so deep this year. It really is. Like, there's a lot of stud wide receivers in this range that I wouldn't be shocked, once we get into the late teens, early 20s, I wouldn't be shocked if they were top 15 finishers.
Well, let's get to one guy, ADP number 12. I think this is who Jake has inside his top 5 this year, going at pick number 36. Top 5 at receiver, mind you, not top 5 overall. Allen Robinson, is that the guy, Jake?
Yeah, that is the guy. I have him at number 5, one spot in front of DeAndre Hopkins.
Explain yourself.
Yeah, you got to make the. I get the case for it, but like, are you anticipating that it's Foles, not Trubisky, or does that matter to you?
It does matter. 100% I'm expecting it. And then even if it was Trubisky for half the season, that still means we get Foles for half the season. Look, we're just talking, it's the target share. It's the fact that Allen Robinson was like 9 or 10 last year and 9 or 10 playing with Trubisky's miserable season. So even if we get a slightly better version of Trubisky, even if we get Nick Foles, which we should hopefully get for the entire season, it's just, we're talking about a target share volume that top 5 wide receivers, the guys that we're talking about before, would be enviable of. Some of them don't even get. And that's where, like, I actually think Anthony Miller is going to break out this season. We saw signs of it late last year. But at the same time, so what? It's Anthony Miller. What else is on this roster? Like, forget what about the tight. Okay, Jimmy Graham, we're going to still do this game. What? Cole Kmet? Like, Taylor. I mean, the wide receiver depth chart in the passing game, you worry about Tariq Cohen in the backfield for a little bit, but he's no more than, we go back to the part 1 that we did with Zeke's concerns for Amari Cooper. I just don't see why people don't like Allen Robinson, who, by the way, I tweeted out earlier this week, Pat. I think Chris is my that's why you probably guessed Allen Robinson thing. He's only 1 year younger than Calvin Ridley. And look at what he's done. And people are like, oh, give me Calvin Ridley. How about the guy who's already done it with the shittiest, I just cursed on your show, Pat, quarterback selection for anybody's starting career?
His 27% target share last season trailed only Michael Thomas and DeAndre Hopkins amongst receivers.
There you go.
I get it. I'm better with the ADP 12 than the ADP or the ranking of 5, but we talked about Beckham to kick off the end of last show. Like, I would rather have Allen Robinson than Odell Beckham for sure, and Cooper Kupp for that matter.
Yeah, and Amari Cooper.
Yeah,
and maybe even Mike Evans because of the safety, and he probably doesn't have the same ceiling. But Jake's right. I mean, top 10 in terms of any kind of setting, standard half-point PPR targets, top 10. He's the guy there, and I don't think it matters who the quarterback is because he just had that type of season with Mitch Trubisky.
I mean, he ended up as what, wide receiver 3 with Blake Bortles as his quarterback.
Yeah,
1 year?
And that season he had 14, 16 touchdowns. So yeah, he's, to Jake's point, he's had just awful quarterbacks throwing him the football. So I think it would be a plus. And I do think it's going to be Nick Foles. You don't acquire Nick Foles and take on that contract to have him sit behind Trubisky.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
Think about all the people that are on the coaching staff with Foles.
Chris,
former
this is what you should have
coordinator,
said.
his former coach, his
All
former
I'm saying is
assistant coach.
I think they want to, like, they're running it like is Trubisky done? They didn't pick up the 5th-year option on him, right?
No.
So this is kind of it for him. They need to see what they have with their former very high draft pick. That I think they're going to give him the best opportunity to. I think it's going to be a competition.
Yeah.
But they're going to lean Trubisky. If he shows anything, I think they'll go with him week 1. If he's just piss poor, then it's going to be Nick Foles.
Okay, so it'll be Foles.
Right.
By
So,
week 4.
so here's what you should, Chris. Here, I'll give you this. You should have said this instead for Pat. When you have the option to go to a capable quarterback, you don't start Trubisky.
Yeah.
Listen, I think theoretically that's a very good idea. I just don't know that in practice that we're going to see that right away.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't matter because he just had this season where he was a wide receiver 1. He was the main part of the offense. under Trubisky and as bad as he was.
I mean, do we expect? I mean, Jake said like with the depth chart that he expects a similar market share of targets, but like 27 is hard to repeat. Like if let's say we drop that down to 23%, which is still really good.
Yeah.
Like what do we lose then, Jake? Do you think?
Well, now you're probably talking. He probably deserves to be around the 10, 11, 12 range, but I don't. What was it 2 years ago? I didn't have that handy to pull it off. So I have to think it was pretty similar.
Well, I guess it's sort of the opposite argument of Beckham then. So where you're still buying Beckham at the point where you think that he is going to
Oh, he got hurt.
basically finish
Go ahead.
at number 11, that Robinson has upward mobility from where he's currently being drafted. And his floor, I wouldn't say his floor is number 12. His floor is probably like getting hurt and being terrible.
Sure.
But with all things being equal, projecting everyone plays 16 games in the same offense that they're in right now, is that Allen Robinson is far more likely to be the number 12 receiver than Beckham is to be number 11.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I don't know if Robinson has the juice in this offense to get up to like top 3, where
Probably
Beckham
not.
has like a 2% outcome where that's the case, but you're not playing the 2% outcome.
Right.
So why would you do that?
Yeah. I mean, you look at these top teams. I mean, apart from Green Bay, and they're a good football team, but I like Arizona,
okay football
Saints, KC, Atlanta. Like these teams are going to score points. Tampa, they're going to score points. Where Chicago is probably middle of the pack as a team that's averaging maybe 20 points.
And here's
if
the
they can
thing.
get their run game going.
For the projection wise, I think we all would agree. I'll even say it myself about my projections. That might be his ceiling at number 5. I mean, that could arguably be that. But for how the projections broke down, 99 receptions. That's barely more than last year. The biggest difference that I have for 7.6 touchdowns, he had 7 last year. The biggest difference is I have more air yards and more yards per reception for him. So even if he replicates last year but doesn't improve there, then my ranking's going to be too high to begin with.
DJ Moore is a wide receiver number 13 being drafted at pick number 37. Teddy B, the new QB in Carolina. They signed Robbie Anderson. Of course, Curtis Samuel is still lingering around. Are people still really fired up for Ian Thomas, Jake?
They are, but apparently not like they are fired up for DJ Moore when you don't put him inside your top 20.
You don't have him inside your top 20? Listen, DJ Moore's like the best keeper that I have in my keeper team. Like I think that he meshes really well with what Bridgewater wants to do. Like DJ Moore didn't make his bones by catching 50. Like he's not going to lead the league in air yards. Put it that way. No, he's not
going to lead in touchdowns either. And look, all right, here's everything. Like again, let me reference it on the first show. I'll say it again. One more touchdown for DJ Moore would jump him probably about from where I have him at 23 to probably about 15. I'm looking at. That's how slim this gap is for this group. If you want to take him here, that's fine. I'm not doing it because there's a lot of factors here. Teddy Bridgewater, yards per attempt, air yards, yards per reception, like whatever number you want to throw out there is down by the bottom of the league. And it actually declined over his career when he threw for the Saints last year. So whatever might be, okay, fine. You didn't have wide receivers outside of Michael Thomas. Okay, throw all that out. Teddy Bridgewater for his entire career has never shown something to be that definitively better than what the Carolina passing game was last year. Kyle Allen, for everybody that wants to hate on him, wasn't as bad for the receivers as people want to make it out to be. I do think Teddy is an upgrade. I just don't think it's an upgrade of the fact of like they brought in Jameis Winston, who's just going to fling it all over the place. You have Christian McCaffrey, who comes first. They signed Robbie Anderson. You still have Curtis Samuel. DJ Moore doesn't score touchdowns. Like, I just don't see why people want to put him in the wide receiver 1 conversation. And this is just outside of it. I'd say wide receiver 1 because I see some people taking him at 10, 11, 12, and everybody screamed their heads off when I had him at 23, 24.
So we make the case sort of against Amari Cooper, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Odell Beckham as being wildly inconsistent players. DJ Moore is the reverse of that. So last season, between Cam for the very first little bit and Kyle Allen, we have DJ Moore 10 games with at least 6 catches, despite the fact that he had wonky quarterback play. The only players who had more games of 6+ catches were Michael Thomas, Allen Robinson, Christian McCaffrey, and DeAndre Hopkins. I think there's a consistency argument and now it's tough because if you're drafting him as your wide receiver 1, you don't want the high floor, low ceiling guy. Right. That's not who you want as a wide receiver 1. However, if you can get him at wide receiver 2, he's going 13th right now. Like you get him around there, maybe at like 16th if he drops a little bit. I think he is a perfect wide receiver 2 for your team because what if he just has a connection with Teddy all of a sudden? He scores like 8 touchdowns. Then he is a wide receiver 1.
Yeah, that is possible. I do agree that his touchdown upside is definitely not as high as, to put him in that wide receiver 1 combo. I definitely wouldn't feel comfortable with him as my wide receiver 1, but I see what you're saying. There is some safety there. He's clearly, outside of CMC, the best option there. Like, I think Robbie Anderson is going to struggle to catch passes from Teddy Bridgewater as opposed to DJ Moore. And listen, this is going to be a bad football team. They're going to have to throw the football. I think that there's going to be plenty of games where DJ Moore gets double-digit targets.
I think that's fine. And I actually have Teddy Bridgewater let me double check. I have him for 550 attempts. I mean, if this swings wildly and it's 600 attempts, that's going to boost everybody, including DJ Moore. It's just the number of teams who pushed Josh ADHD, who a lot of people out there, he makes a lot of fun tables, especially for the Scott Fish Bowl. He actually asked the question when I was tweeting about it. He's like, do you know how many teams per year have averaged 600 attempts by their quarterbacks? And the average is about 7. So my question is Carolina one of the 7? That it's not like it's a lot more than it ever used to be, but let's go through the list and we could probably name teams, and we could probably name at least 10 that we would think would do it before the Panthers did.
Sure, I agree with you, but I kind of agree with Chris too. Like, the defense is going to be bad. They're in a division with other high-scoring offenses. Yeah. That's just going to force them to take to the air as much as possible, and they have the perfect person that they can pass to. It's really, I think, the bad defense have to pass more is really the case of why McCaffrey you should take over Barkley at number 1.
See, I'm gonna look. I'm not going full Chris Harris on you guys. I hate that bad defense argument too much. It is a factor, but I think people get a little too hung. I'm not saying you guys are, but we've seen defenses surprise year after year after year, not just from a fantasy standpoint, where 2 of the defenses outside the top 15 ended up being top 5 defenses. I'm just saying, year in and year out. Chris knows this because I've brought it up on the show when he and I do shows together a lot. I talk about the Saints one year went from being one of the best to one of the worst, just 8 games and 8 games flipped in the middle of the season. It was the same season the Giants went the opposite direction and was all of a sudden in the top 5. You wanted to stay away from him defense. So I understand that, but I don't want people to just get caught up in that, be like, oh, look, they have no talent on the wide receiver. They're going to be running 45 plays on offense a game because of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's not the reason I like DJ, but
that's a bonus. I feel like that's a
something
bonus,
that should
but
be.
they were already
up.
number 1 in pace of play last year.
Yeah,
they were already number 1. So
for sure. They're going to be a team that plays the over a lot. They really are. I mean,
right.
The defense is an issue. I mean, I think they were the first team in a long time to only draft defensive players. Clearly that is
maybe they all hit and their defense is the best in the league. I don't know.
Maybe it is. It's possible. But I think when we think about Teddy Bridgewater, we see a guy who's conservative. We see a guy who maybe what Carolina's focus or game plan would be, okay, we want you to 20 to 25 passes.
Now, there's an argument against that too, though. Like, is Teddy Bridgewater a conservative quarterback based on what we saw last year, or is that what he just had to do for the Saints in order to win? Like, you didn't have to ask Teddy to do too much. They won, all of the games but one when he started?
Yeah, but even when it's the beginning of his career, his first 2 seasons were meh. Like, he actually threw more and same amount of touchdowns in his second season. He hasn't shown to be a really aggressive big game play. Now, I will the one thing you guys didn't throw out, I'll throw out a positive, is I think a lot of people are forgetting Joe Brady, who made the LSU offense what it was. Yeah. And for the longest time, that offense used to not throw to a running back, not to be explosive as it was. He's now with the Panthers. So he's brought in as the offensive coordinator with this new Matt Rule and everything like that. If you want to throw out a positive against me, I would even say he might come in and do what he did with LSU with the Panthers, and maybe he does throw 600 times this year.
And they seem to love Teddy a lot more than I do.
Yeah, I thought
they were all about Teddy.
I thought it was an interesting signing. So the next guy, number 14, I can't see him finishing as wide receiver 14, but it's AJ Brown. Yeah. And I don't mean that as there's no way he could finish 14. I mean, he could finish 3.
Yeah.
But it could also just go back. Maybe. How much do you believe in the last 6 weeks of the season, Jake?
Not to the degree it was last year. So I'd say 75, 80%. As in, I kind of used a good barometer for the entire year of AJ Brown. I'll give you 70 receptions on the year. But the thing that helps AJ Brown, you're talking about huge numbers per reception. I mean, we're kind of talking back to some of the better receivers that Amari Cooper, kind of like that type of thing. So where he landed for me was actually at 11. That's also his 7.6 touchdowns. with Tannehill isn't what he was, if Tannehill isn't as efficient, because that's the biggest thing too that we complain about Tannehill last year is what happens when he doesn't throw 2 or 3 touchdowns because he's only attempting 17 passes. So if Tannehill doesn't see more attempts and actually loses his efficiency, which is a definite concern, maybe AJ Brown's puts up those receiving numbers with only 4 touchdowns. And now with only 4 touchdowns, he's down at wide receiver 23, 4, 5.
He finished top 7 at receiver for the week for the final 6 weeks of the season. And over the course of the entire 16 games, he finished only behind Michael Thomas in yards per route run. So the upside for him, and you have the entire argument is, who is taking away the target share from AJ Brown at this point?
No, but those are some of those games he only had 3 catches. Like there was a game I think he had 4 targets, 3 catches, and he finishes as a top 3 wide receiver for the week. It's that upside. I'd be shocked if he got to 70 plus catches, to be honest. He's a bit of a fade for me in this range.
I actually don't know what to make of him. Like I'm very intrigued. Very intrigued. But
I don't think the Titans are going to surprise. Like teams are going to be ready for that play action this year. It's not going to be like last year.
It's quite possible.
Yeah.
For my top 24 wide receivers, he's got the lowest reception amount.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. We were talking about Deshaun Jackson earlier. It's very Deshaun Jackson. Like, how many wide receivers have you seen over the years with 50 grabs and 1,000 yards? I mean, it does not happen very often.
Next guy on the list, with the presumably returning Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback, JuJu. Your big fade from last year. That really worked out.
That did work out.
15th, 41 ADP.
So I like this range a lot more. 15 is a guy to be your wide receiver too. As last year he was going in that 5 to 8 range, and my question was, Antonio Brown is gone. Can he handle that top coverage? And Big Ben's a little bit older, and now Big Ben is a little bit older than last year, and he hasn't played for a full year. So I still have some question marks with the offense, but I can get behind this price. Like I like it. I think it's fair. I think Johnson can take another step forward. I think there's a weapon there. Last year it was just Moncrief and Washington and a couple questions.
Moncrief,
right?
I remember drafting that loser.
It's like, hey, Moncrief's going to be fine. He'll get some top corners and JuJu will be great. But yeah, I was down on him last year and I'm in on him this year. I like the price.
It's more than double where he was going. So last year he was wide receiver 6, pick number 15. This year he's wide receiver number 15, pick number 41. So yeah, there's a lot less risk having him as
he was hurt last
your
year
mid-year, and the quarterback was hurt. Like it was just a terrible situation all around. Jake, do you think he can rebound?
I definitely think he can. I think you still have the questions that Chris brought up last year and the fact that can he handle the number 1 attention every single week, week in and week out. But Deontay Johnson was showing signs of improvement as a rookie last year. James Washington, I still don't think is dead. They drafted Chase Claypool. They have tight end options. If James Conner stays healthy, is a better pass catcher than some people realize. So there's a plenty of options on this team. And I throw all that out to that. I'm not making the argument there's only one ball to go around. I'm making the argument that you brought up before with like the DeAndre Hopkins and everything like that is that, maybe he doesn't see double coverage all the time because they can't, because they, if they do that, they're going to get killed 5 different other ways. So there's certainly a concern, especially because he's kind of in that big slot mold. He's kind of like, if you want the best case scenario, he's Michael Thomas. I don't think he ever gets to that level, but that's what you have to think of. If they force him outside too much, there's the question about Ben Roethlisberger. I think this is a fair spot and kind of where he should have been last year for a fair risk assessment, honestly.
Yeah, I like the addition of Claypool too. They just have more options now, more weapons.
Did you see him doing all the backflips, Chris?
Oh yeah.
It's like the Jermichael Finley catching 2 balls at the same time. Like, oh, increase his stock. But like, do we just worry that Ben is absolutely washed?
Yes, I worry about that. That was one of my big concerns last year. I know the last time we saw him over the full season, what did he throw? Jake, 5,000 yards. He was a beast. He was awesome. But he's another year we haven't seen him play.
He was hurt all year. Now. He looks like he might legitimately weigh 1,000 pounds. Yes. 2-ton Ben.
I'm actually worried that the beard sapped his power when he shaved it off. I have him for 4,400 yards and 32 touchdowns. I think it's a very fair Ben number.
I think that if you want to gamble that Ben is, not let's say Ben, but he's 90% Ben Roethlisberger that you have in your head.
It's a win.
Everyone on the Steelers, including the Steelers win total, their Super Bowl odds are wildly undervalued.
Yeah, they were what?
So just go all in Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, they were a 500 team last year, scoring 12 points a game. down
Yeah,
the
like their
stretch.
defense is sneaky, very good.
Oh, it's very good. I think it's a top 5 defense in the league, and they got nothing from Mason Rudolph or Devlin Hodges.
and
whoever
then
the hell was
Connor
playing
got hurt
quarterback.
for
See,
a while. Like,
Can I
there's,
go back to
there's a massive discount on all these Steelers.
Yes.
I want to go back to that real quick. And again, I'm not trying to come after you guys, but you just
Do
said
it.
top 5 defense. Nobody ever does that. Nobody ever goes, well, they have a top 5 defense, so they're not going to be passing that much. Like, no, it's everybody always wants to make the argument for the terrible
Right.
defense, but nobody ever brings up a good defense is going to potentially hurt the offense.
No, but I completely agree with you with that, and I think that their pace probably isn't going to be super fast either. They're going to try to run the ball as much as possible, presumably, especially with Connor on the last year of his deal. Run him into the ground.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
he gets hurt, he gets hurt. You just go to the next guy down the line. But with
So cruel.
the actual, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
That's how teams are approaching this. But if with Ben, I mean, a lot of his stats come, when Antonio Brown is still there, and if we just look at it right
On the
now,
flip
like
side-
we can talk about all of the other options that they have. Like, oh yeah, Washington's going to be a super breakout player. Deontay Johnson's like the guy you got to draft. Like, if you just go and look at it, JuJu Smith-Schuster has 224 career targets from Ben Roethlisberger. If you look down the line, I know a lot of this has to do with last year and him not playing. Washington, Johnson, and Switzer have a combined 103.
Yeah.
And that's the
the
volume.
clear
That's
guy.
what gets you so excited. It could be
yeah.
Allen Robinson like volume.
Yes.
So then I'm not super concerned that if they have a good defense playing ahead, that if Juju is going to demand the sort of market share, it's the other guys that I would more worry about as opposed to Juju.
Right.
Correct.
Well, and then to go back to not overrating one stat too much, do you guys know what number the 2 worst pace of play teams were? The 2 slowest teams were last year?
I think the Colts were in around there. No?
Colts and
No, they're
Jets.
actually middle of the pack.
Middle of the pack?
Nope.
They're
I'm,
probably,
I'm debunking and putting too much faith into one stat.
well,
the
no,
Saints and the
I-
Ravens.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a team
yeah.
that's very good and runs a lot.
Niners
Saints and Ravens were number 1 and number 2 and slowest per game, and we don't care about their offenses. I'm saying,
Yeah,
like, all I'm saying is these things matter as a small piece. It is something to factor in, but don't ever just fall a trap of holding on to one stat, like the David Montgomery broken tackles from college. So we saw how that worked out.
No, but I think that the Ravens thing actually does make a lot of sense because realistically, besides Lamar, who and I guess Mark Andrews, like who are you super excited about on drafting on the Ravens as a
Marquise
fantasy
Brown.
player? Maybe,
Mark,
but Marquise Brown
I-
is like the worst version of like these like up or down guys that we've talked about.
no, he could be Deshaun Jackson in his prime this year. But the good news is you're getting him in the 30s and 40s. That's the good. You don't have to pay a premium price like you did with JuJu Smith-Schuster.
And with the Saints, like there are 3 viable options that you can draft off their team. You draft Michael Thomas, you can draft Kamara,
Yeah.
and then Drew Brees. Maybe you go with Drew Brees. That's basically it, isn't it? Like, are
And
people?
don't say his name.
Yeah. We're
Don't
not
say the
drafting
other
tight end.
We might draft a rookie tight end.
Yeah, we might draft
Who
a
knows?
rookie tight end before.
There you
him,
go.
Yeah.
There you
Or
go.
Latavius.
So number 16, this one is like a league winner or the guy that like just does absolutely. I doubt he'll do absolutely nothing, but it feels like a weird spot for him because he should be higher at this point and he's
Yeah.
not, and I don't know
Look
why.
at the range of outcomes with him. Over
Yeah.
the far
So
right.
the 16th receiver off the board, number 47 overall, is Adam Thielen. Gone as high as 19th overall, as low as 76th
That's wild.
overall. No Diggs.
Oof.
Dalvin Cook, as we speak right now, currently in the midst of holding out.
Yeah.
I don't really,
Doesn't really have any leverage.
put it this way. Until he's holding out a month from now,
Yeah.
then I'll be concerned about it. Right now, I'm not doing drafts right now, so I don't care.
Yeah.
But he should be in, like all things being equal, like he should outscore Allen Robinson this year, shouldn't he?
He's close.
I
Do you
don't-
want to?
Yeah, I don't know about Robinson. Just jump in here, Jake. Like ahead of AJ Brown, ahead of DJ Moore,
Yes.
ahead of Beckham for me.
Yes.
This is
Yes.
somebody that I think he's the clear number 1 on his team. I know they want to run the football, and you got Jefferson on the other side, who's just a rookie, who's probably going to be, quote unquote, behind the 8 ball right away. It's just Thielen is going to be the guy. I just see him as somebody who is consistently going to get about 10 targets a game, and I think where he's going here is an absolute steal. The fact that I see 76 in here, that you could potentially get him in the 6th round.
I assume that had to have been like before Diggs got traded. That number is coming from. I just don't get that number.
Yeah,
Who is waiting that long to take Adam Thielen?
Thielen's this is a great price.
To your point, Chris, 2 years ago when he averaged 9.5 reception or targets per game, he finished as wide receiver 7, so actually 6 in some leagues. So like you also said, no Diggs. You forgot one part, Pat. No Stefanski. Like this offense could potentially open back up to pass again a little bit more. You have Justin Jefferson, who should be the number 2, who is actually better at the slot than outside. And if they force him outside, is what the early talk is. Then you have Adam Thielen back in the slot where he just dominated. Even so, he still did fine outside. But it's going to be him. Like I have him at 10. Like your point about bringing out Allen Robinson up is a great one, because if you told me today I could bet on 2 who has the highest target share, as much as I raved and ranted about Allen Robinson, I would take the odds on Thielen because he's got so much less competition.
Yeah, even in 2018, he saw a 25% target share. That was with Diggs. And he had actually never missed a game before last season. Right. So any durability concerns, maybe once you get one injury, you end up having myriad injuries. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he's been relatively reliable. Like I think a good comp for him in this range is DJ Moore. Like I would rather have Thielen than DJ Moore.
Me too.
And I think that you expect similar things out of them. And we've seen seasons where they like to use Adam Thielen in the red zone.
Yeah, like he's been undervalued since he broke out in the league, and he was a great waiver wire pickup. I think he had the big breakout game against Detroit Thanksgiving. He's been a beast ever since. He's got terrific hands. He runs great routes. Like there's so much to like about Adam Thielen, and again, he's getting disrespected.
And he's the number 1 on a team, unless Jefferson comes in and takes the world by storm. Mm-hmm. That, like Jake said, you could see him pushing like a 30% market share this year. That wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, which is just insane.
Exactly. It's perception too, undrafted. Didn't he go to like the state college or something like that?
I think it was like Minnesota State.
Yeah, so there you go. It's like we've talked about on the shows already. It's perception with a lot of these guys. It's the Julio perception. It's the Odell Beckham perception. It's what people stick onto and hold on to the most. And I think it's just people still see Adam Thielen as a quote unquote surprise.
He should be considered a top 10 wide receiver with no Diggs, in my opinion.
When we finally do the ranking show, he might be up there.
Borderline.
We'll see about that. Courtland Sutton's number 17.
That's fair.
Pick number 47. Off the board, him and Thielen have basically the exact same ADP. He accounted for a league high 42% of Denver's air yards last season. Although this Denver offense, a bit different than it was a year ago. Noah Fant's probably going to play a larger role. Judge Judy going to get in on the action. You got Melvin Gordon to steal touchdowns out of the backfield.
Hamler, this offense is. It may be the most improved in football.
Unless Drew Lock doesn't improve,
and I think
not going to be.
And I think Drew Lock could be fine. What do you have, like a 64 completion rate last year, thrown basically just to Sutton. We've seen some quarterbacks over the years, like Wentz take that leap forward in year 2, and it's possible that Drew Lock can spread the ball around and these guys and the offense can be good, but. If it's, and I think this is obvious, but if they didn't draft Judy and they didn't draft Big A or Big O and they didn't draft KJ Hamler, we're talking about Sutton as being in the Kenny Golladay range.
Yeah, but initially
he's not going to have that target share.
No, but initially he was going around like wide receiver 10, 11, 12 till the draft. But it's not like he fell all that far. He's still wide receiver number 17. That feels. Maybe his talent is so much higher than everyone else's that he's the one who breaks through, but it feels like a lesser Amari Cooper situation.
Yeah. I mean, Jake, he was fine with Lock too. I mean, I think his first game with Lock had 2 touchdowns.
And a lot of it's going to hinge on Lock, but a lot of it's to what you guys have already mentioned so far. Now we are kind of talking about the one ball situation because 2 options out of the backfield, and I'm including Melvin Gordon in the passing game, but a terrific passing game option, Philip Lindsay. I'm not even forget Big O, the tight end. I'm not even going to try to say his last name because he's a rookie, but Fant is still there, who was, in my opinion, the best receiving tight end in last year's draft class and one of the best receiving tight ends in the last 5 draft classes. And I don't even think he's going to break out to what people think because there's just so many options now with Jerry Jeudy, who was in tier 1 for me with wide receivers. And you talked about Hamler there, Chris, who could push Deshaun Hamilton. I was pour one out for him. And you know how much I love him. Might not even be on the team at this point. Like when we start the season, there's just a lot of options here where Drew Lock needs to break out for all these guys to be reliable. And to your point, Pat, Courtland Sutton, I did have him right around fringe wide receiver 1 after the draft. I said that's a fair spot. I am at 21, but again, to keep hammering this point home, there's less than a point between him and wide receiver 15.
I'll probably not be taking Courtland Sutton.
Yeah, me neither. There's a
because
few guys behind him.
that's the whole thing. Like once we keep going down, number 18 on the list is DK Metcalf, who is going at pick number 49, and we'll throw Lockett
Over Tyler Lockett?
Yeah, Tyler Lockett is number
was a little
22,
surprised to see
who is
that, too.
going at number 58. I like Metcalf more than I like Lockett.
And I do too. And then I see this kind of stuff, and then I'm like, now Lockett is a little bit of a value and a discount.
So here are two things about these two guys. One fun stat each. So Tyler Lockett leads all wide receivers in catch rate above expectations since 2018 per next gen, and he has scored on 13% of receptions over that stretch. His previous 2 seasons, he scored on 3.5%. So, I mean, a lot of people talked about last year that there's natural touchdown regression coming for him. Didn't really happen.
No.
But is this the pace that he's always going to set? That's tough to say. It reminds me of years that in fantasy baseball, Matt Cain's batting average of balls in play was just abnormally low compared to everyone else. And it stayed that way for like 7 years. It was just something it turned out he was good at. Maybe Lockett is good at this. You know what I would bank on, though? DK Metcalf, 19 end zone targets last year, 3 more than anyone else, most in the league since Kelvin Benjamin years ago. And year 2, you have to think that he's a more polished prospect.
And do you see the completion percentage in his red zone targets is the worst out of anybody who had double-digit targets. It was like 29%.
That's fine. He's also thrown to him.
Right. But
Kelvin Benjamin in 2014,
But that's partly him.
24 end zone targets.
yeah, so there's some room to grow. With you got Russell Wilson, an accurate quarterback. You got Tyler Lockett, who led the league and led everybody in red zone targets. He's up near 73%. You look at both of them in terms of just targets. I think Lockett right around 110, DK right around 100, but Metcalf only catches half of them. I think there's still room to grow for Metcalf. But when I see this, I'm a little surprised in the fact that...
Yeah, but people are just seeing what we're seeing.
Yeah.
That's all they're doing.
Nah, I'm not seeing the same thing.
Well,
Here's
you want to
the
go.
thing, like-
You can either side with most accurate Jake or Pat, who just says things forcefully.
No. That's certainly look everything. I'm not saying none of what you're saying warrants consideration. For me, like Matt Cain was a really good situation, but also Matt Cain wasn't playing specifically. Well, I mean, I guess if you want to say the catcher helped, but like Buster Posey, Buster Posey's not like we're just going to tune out. He's not like a framing pitcher where like that was part of it. My point is like he's playing with somebody else, that being Metcalf and Lockett. Like when do we just say, hey, you know what? Russell Wilson and Lockett have a thing. Like we have to attribute some connection. And we were talking about chemistry before with Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham on the flip side. This is the inverse. These guys are so great together. This is Gronkowski and Tom Brady. Like let's give some credit to these guys playing together and well together. And where DK Metcalf can grow, the problem was like those red zone targets and all that type of stuff. I don't think that's necessarily going to just snap, move, all of a sudden he's catching 40, 50%, because where DK Metcalf needs to grow is credit to the Seahawks using him how he needs to be used, is that straight line runner, not too many breaks short over the intermediate field because you lined up on the one side of the field. We knew his inability to cut routes well. A lot of that does with the end zone too. The reason he didn't catch a lot of them is because they're contested. He's such a freak body-wise that he wins some of them, but similar to, let's go back to Des Bryant, and maybe he does that route. Maybe he catches 10, 11, 12, 13 touchdowns because he starts doing better like Des Bryant, but Des Bryant never separated well, but he was just that good at out-muscling and out-bodying and winning those contested balls. That's where DK Metcalf needs to grow, not necessarily in the route running.
I'm in on DK Metcalf.
Me too. I am as well. I'm in on both of these guys. I think they're fine. I think they can.
I'm in on them, just not more than Lockett.
Yeah. I mean, it's not much of a difference. I mean, we're only talking about a couple picks. You choose.
Yeah, but then you have to choose which one you want. I'm
make
choosing
the
DK
choice.
Metcalf.
I think there could be, and I mean, call me crazy. I think there could be a higher ceiling with DK Metcalf.
I know there is a higher ceiling
Like
with DK.
because of the
touchdown.
catch, it's almost
No,
almost
it's because of the
double.
touchdowns. Like if you end up with the most end zone targets again, and it flips, like you have an exceptional year in contested catch rate, or you just have some natural luck. All of a sudden, you're looking at someone who could score like 15 touchdowns.
Yeah,
that's just not going to happen.
And Russell started to lean on him towards the end of the season. You saw in the postseason game, he had the huge playoff game there. I mean, with Lockett, I was kind of surprised to see where he finished. Jake, I don't know if I have the numbers handy, but he finished as a solid wide receiver too,
14.
despite some inconsistencies. And we're talking maybe not as high level as Tyreek Hill, but there were some games. Remember, I think one game he had 14, 15 targets, and then all of a sudden he had 1, 2, 3 over the next couple games. This weirdness to his game.
It was hard to predict too. Like there are some players you can be like, oh, this is like the Cooper thing, like, oh, he's going up against the top corner.
Is he going to be
don't,
followed?
or
Yeah.
and on the road?
Exactly.
Don't play him.
Yeah.
With Lockett, like it could have been anytime, anywhere against anybody, good or bad. Which is odd.
And Tyler Lockett's essentially Amari Cooper, to your point, Chris. I don't disagree with that.
Next guy, we talked about him briefly with the Julio conversation, but Calvin Ridley is the number 19 wide receiver off the board, pick number 51 right now. Average over 120 air yards per game over his final 5. In 2019, every 6.4 air yards resulted for 1 fantasy point for wide receivers league-wide. That would be very good. If you average that out, he would score more points per game than Julio Jones. But I feel like he's just getting too much hype.
He is getting a lot of hype. I'm fine with him at this price, though. I think
high is 30, low is 70.
Yeah, 30's high. That's too high for me. But ADP 50, wide receiver 2. You're gonna go back if you get him as your wide receiver 2. I think you'll be laughing. I mean, I see him as a guy who easily 1,000 yards, continue to grow with Matt Ryan. We already talked about Julio and the amount of times that Matt Ryan throws a football. So I would have him. I have actually in my own rankings a little bit higher, like over Sutton, over AJ Brown.
I wouldn't have him over AJ Brown.
I think there's just more catches. And more
there definitely is. There are more receptions to be had for Calvin Ridley, likely than AJ Brown. But I think that the actual opportunity and efficiency of the Titans offense, like let's say Derrick Henry doesn't have repeats his year, and all of a sudden that's not something they can just go lean on 24/7, then maybe all of a sudden it ticks up for AJ Brown a little bit. They have to lean on him a little bit more.
Possible.
What do you make of Ridley? Is 19 a good spot for him, Jake?
I think that's a fair spot. And to go back to the point from before, I have Ridley at 24, but you give him a half of a touchdown and he moves up 4 spots because now we're getting super thin on these differences. And I think this is also a testament if you want to go running back to start and you don't necessarily get a wide receiver 1 inside the top 10, you get 3 from the Suttons, the Locketts, Metcalfs, like all these guys we're talking about right now. You're fine. Like you're golden because one of them is probably going to finish near wide receiver 1, if not inside the top 10. I wouldn't go as far as Ridley. My bigger concern is I do have him for more receptions. I have him for 74. But that's a leap over the 60, 3 or 4 he had last year. So I'm not saying that Ridley can't do better than where I have him, which would be this ADP, and even potentially better than that. I just think that Hayden Hurst is going to absorb a lot of what Austin Hooper did. And not because of what Matt Ryan's talking about. It's just the tight ends used. And Russell Gage is still going to be, whether it's him or Zacchaeus, whoever's the third wide receiver, somebody's going to see some of those targets. Matt Ryan's just not going to funnel everything to like your point from the first show we did. It's not going to be a Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper with Derek Carr, where it's just Ridley and Julio Jones every week.
Debatable.
I agree with Jake. I don't think that's going to be the case. Like it's going to be Julio. Like it's a very distinct pecking order, and I'm curious to see how Hayden Hurst actually does.
Gurley,
and Gurley, do they become? They probably don't become a full running team because Gurley could be washed, but at the same time, maybe they do utilize him as a pass catcher.
He checked out.
Yeah. Well, how many catches? I mean, Freeman surprisingly had over 50 catches last year. Did he not?
Yeah.
I mean, he's obviously had seasons where he's had more than that.
Yeah, I want to talk about washed.
Yeah,
for sure.
Did he end up anywhere yet?
No, he wants too much money.
He wants $10 million a year. No.
Listen, so do I. That's what I'm asking for too.
Me as well.
We're gonna both end up out of a job. Keenan Allen is number 21.
That's crazy.
I don't know what to make about Keenan Allen. He could be the biggest steal of drafts,
or be like the worst pick of all time,
and just be frustrating as hell to own.
Can I give you some hot Keenan Allen positive news?
I want them.
97 or more catches in all 16 games played in 3 consecutive seasons. Sammy Watkins was wide receiver number 11 in 2015 in a minimum of 10 games. With Tyrod Taylor as his quarterback. Yeah. I think he could do it.
I think he could too.
And again, he's another guy, he's gone as high as 29, as low as 75. Yeah. There's a huge range on him. He would be someone I'd be very willing to take if he starts dropping. He's not a player I'm going to reach for.
No, I still have him at 16 though. That's 13. I have 91 receptions, 13 fewer than he had last year. So I have him for a downgrade from Tyrod Taylor. But I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I've been referencing a lot. Is that Sammy Watkins, even before his greatest season, I would want to put that in quotes, but he was fine with Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor is not going to destroy this offense. And for everybody out there that thinks that Herbert might take over, well, you know what? He's going to be basically Jameis Winston, just flinging it all over the place because he's got no good decision making. So it might actually even be better for Keenan Allen because he's just going to be throwing Blake Bortles. You're going to get Blake Bortles for the last couple games of the season.
Yeah, I was originally thinking that a guy like Mike Williams would be hurt by this, but then I went back and I was looking at those seasons with Tyrod Taylor, and like Robert Woods was there and he wasn't doing anything, and it was Sammy Watkins. I mean, there was a deep ball connection between them two that one season. There was some big time games, but I'm in agreement here. I think Keenan Allen is not on my radar. He's not a target of mine. But if he's going to drop to the mid-20s where I can get him as my wide receiver 3,
Yeah, that's
I'm
the
just
thing.
going to lock him in and move on.
Then it's an acceptable
'Cause
gamble.
Phillip Rivers was trash last year.
He was always throwing.
Yeah,
Always,
I would take
always
him
be
over
chucking.
both Seattle
But he
guys.
was chucking him the
I would not take him over DK Metcalf. I would not.
I would.
No.
I would take him over. I would take him over both of them. I would take him over Cooper Kupp, Courtland Sutton. I would take over DJ Moore. I'm still on Keenan Allen. I'm apparently going to own a hell of a lot of Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I think he will, because I mean he definitely does stand out as one of the nicest priced wide receivers.
Now, is that name value only, or is, like Jake said, this is backed up by what he's previously done, and with Tyrod not being as. But the whole Tyrod thing I find really interesting, because what Tyrod are we actually getting here?
Yeah, I know.
Like it's been
a
some
long
time
time
since we've seen like
I
full
know.
full go Tyrod.
According to Anthony Lynn, he's better than the 2016 version.
4 years later, like, thanks, Lynn.
Yeah.
It's hard to. I think it's going to be Taylor probably all year, unless his team is just downright awful, and then they just.
I
Make
think
the
they could be
switch
good with
halfway. But I
Tyrod.
do, yeah. I think
If Tyrod's good, they
take
could
care
be
of the
really good.
football. I mean, they've still got some pieces on defense. They have a lot of weapons on offense still, so it's tough, man. I think there's a
here's the
regression
real-
though, from everybody.
Okay, we're not on the quarterback show yet, but let me throw this out there. Let's say you can guarantee 16 games from Tyrod Taylor. Who scores more fantasy points? Tyrod or Tom Brady?
Tom Brady.
I think Brady.
I think Tyrod does.
This is the nice
Don't-
rushing
Tyrod would be more
floor.
consistent.
The rushing, man, the rushing is
Yeah.
as we
It's huge.
saw with Josh Allen last year.
Yeah, oh,
Now,
yeah.
a lot of that was touchdown based.
Mhm.
It wasn't just anything like that, but I think that rushing floor is so valuable.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of people don't really think about. I mean,
They-
Mitch
they-
Trubisky
I think
a couple
I think
years
they're
ago
thinking-
was a
I think-
borderline QB1 because he was sneaky on the ground and as awful as he was. So Taylor, in those, I know we're talking about him, but in the Superflex 2 quarterback, I mean,
Fire him up,
yeah, absolutely.
and then just draft
I don't
Ebale
know.
as your backup, who's probably also going to run.
Bear.
My only concern would be, my concern would be how much is he going to run? Like, is he going to run like he did those days? So that's where I kind of add to your question, Pat. Like, is he going to run like the first 2 seasons of Buffalo? Because I think declined a little bit in the 3rd season. But even if you get somewhere in that, maybe in the mix between the two, maybe it's 500 yards and 5 rushing touchdowns, then I'm with you. My concern is, like, is he actually going to run that much at this point of his career? I don't know. The offensive line is a big question mark for that team, has continuously been. So certainly later. I'm going to say, if you told me 16 games of Tyrod and he's running like he used to with the Bills, then I think you actually have a good conversation to say more than Tom Brady.
Let's just say it's hard to give like a yardage base, but let's say he averages 7 rushing attempts per game.
Okay, so that's like 30 yards, 35
Yeah, I was gonna
yards.
say like
Maybe.
25, 28. Yeah, and with Buffalo too, like he kind of had to run, man. Like
Yeah.
who was he throwing to? Like CJ Spiller in the backfield. He's got some options here on this
Right,
team
but that
where he
puts him at, like,
doesn't have to use his
450,
legs. But
maybe
we'll say
500
this:
for the season.
a lot of these Chargers, I mean, you're getting at a discount. I mean, Eckler at times towards the end of last season, we're talking about him as a lock of RB5. That's not,
I'm
that's not the
more and
case.
more as we discussed on the running back show. I'm more and more out on Eckler the longer we go into this.
Yeah.
Well, but that seems
too.
to be the feel for everybody. Like again, 6 months ago, we're talking about him as a shoe and as an RB1. That's not the case anymore. You don't have to draft him as an RB1.
Don't include me in that crap.
Keenan Allen, even Mike Williams, like these are guys that will probably regress a little bit, but you're getting good value with them.
Number 20. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, don't mention the 20 because I actually think I'll be better after you mention who this person is.
All right, so I skipped over number 20, Robert Woods, because we covered him along with Cooper Kupp in part 1. 22 was Tyler Lockett. Number 23 is DeVante Parker.
Finally.
Pick
Finally.
number
So-
61, Preston Williams could return for week 1. I think that there's
Sure.
a down feeling towards Parker. It's funny because for years, everyone wanted to draft him despite the fact that he did nothing. Now he's done something. People are like, I don't know. Like, the guy did nothing for years, and he was like, wide receiver number 29. He finally has a great season. He's wide receiver number 23.
I know, it's very
This-
puzzling.
But
This
no,
was-
it's the Tua thing. If Tua ends up playing, I think people have huge reservations about DeVante Parker. Not like right away, like the first 5 weeks, he'd be great. But if all of a sudden Fitz magic turns into bad Fitz magic, and Tua is like healthy enough to play, what does that mean for DeVante Parker?
I'm not that concerned about Tua. I think people are overrating what Tua. I think people forgot what Tua did. There's the tank for Tua just a year ago. Like people are, it's so funny. But I'm glad you brought up the DeVante Parker. Is like he finally did it, and people are like, because I was gonna say that compares a lot to Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams at the beginning of career was like, oh my god, his hands are terrible. This guy needs so much work. He finally got better, and then people are like, I still don't know if I like Devontae Adams. That was the second year when they were like hesitating to draft him still. So I will say that DeVante Parker for me checked in at 14 on 70 receptions, because with 70 receptions, very similar to AJ Brown, he's going to do most or more than most with those receptions, Fitz or Tua aside. And the other point I was saying, Pat, what I wanted to wait for you to mention this name is I have him at 14. I think the sidebar to this entire conversation of anybody from basically 13, 14, 15 down to 25, right? It's just like who you like, because whether you say DK Metcalf like you did, whether we haven't even brought up, well, I'm sure we will, Terry McLaurin, I love.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be names you like that you're going to be able to wait and get in rounds 5, 6, and 7. And it's just going to be who you like. Go look at the ADP and figure out where you can wait and potentially get 3 guys you have inside the top 20.
Yeah, like with the way that this is shaking down based on the overall numbers, like Parker picked number 61, DK Metcalf picked number 50, essentially, that when we talked about depth at receiver, that if you just wanted to go running back, tight end, receiver, or running back, wide receiver, draft Kelsey somewhat highly or something like that, you could theoretically...
Running back, Lamar Jackson, wide
Sure,
receiver.
However you want to go it. You could possibly end up with Metcalf, Parker, McLaurin as your 1, 2, 3. Now, that doesn't sound very good.
I would love that.
Yeah,
I would if those were my 3 wide receivers
fine.
and I went big time at running back,
Yeah,
that's the team.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the winning team.
Yeah, 3 for 3. I'm in on Parker. It seems like a scared price. And you brought up Adams, Jake, and when Pat brought up Parker, he's the first guy I thought of. There's a lot of similarities. I mean, Adams that 1 year was right around this range, and then he was brutal. And then the following year, you got him for free. There was an injury to Jordy, and he took off. And we just saw him take off. I mean, the skill set has always been there. If you've watched him play, you're like, wow, he had 1 catch. That catch was unbelievable. Where did he go the rest of the game? Like it's not a surprise when you look at last year's numbers. To me, I'm not surprised to see that. He just finally put it together. He's healthy. He can handle top coverage. But look at the range again, and people are scared. 32 to 95. It's unbelievable, the difference. I'm in on this price. I'm perfectly fine with Parker, and I also like Preston Williams. It's the 2 guys there.
He doubled his career touchdown total last year with 9, and 8 of those came from Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
He became the 4th different wide receiver to catch 8+ touchdown passes in a season from Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Fitz is starting week 1, though. We're all in agreement, right? I mean,
Yeah, he has to. Like,
gonna start.
I would think that he probably starts the entire season based on Tua's health.
I'm leaning that way.
Yeah.
I'm leaning they just sit Tua. What's the point?
Yeah, what's the point? I mean, Miami was
I-
5 and 4 in the
well,
last 9 games.
I also
last
think
year.
Miami can win the AFC East, so that's where I'm at right now.
I was kind of saying, like,
they're 9-1 to win the division.
in the last 9 games or I guess it was the 9 weeks, they were 5 and 4.
Yeah, and
I
they
mean,
lost
the
a
Pats
game
were 4 and 5.
They lost a game to the Jets, where the Jets kicked like 8 field goals.
Yeah.
And then they carried their kicker off the field like a bunch of losers.
They improved the offensive line. Obviously I'm not a huge fan of Jordan Howard, but the run game is going to be better than what it was last year.
Jordan
Somewhere
Howard.
Tim's raging out now.
Oh, yeah, of course he is. I think Jordan Howard might be a great fantasy pick.
I think him and Breida are both. I'm going to have shares of, not on the same team, but I'm going to have shares of either one.
But
of those
everyone's
guys.
drafting Breida. Like when we get to week 1 and Jordan Howard has like 22 carries, it's going to be like, oh, great. Here we go again.
And he'll probably be the goal line back there. I can say that with confidence.
You're
actually.
probably leaning to that one. Here is a fun player. His range of draft right now is as high as 25, as low as 85.
I'm out.
I'm in. Wide receiver number 24, pick number 64. You give me Stefon Diggs at pick number 64, and just hope that here's the argument that I like. Jake brought up an argument earlier about like, oh, if it's a good defense, why do we only talk about bad defenses? And when we ever talk about good defenses impacting people the other way.
Sure.
There are 2 quarterbacks right now that we look at, and there's opposite cases being made for both of them, which makes no sense. So Sam Darnold, he's so young. Of course he's going to improve and get better in year 3. Josh Allen, he sucks. He'll never get better. Although Josh Allen is better.
Yes.
So if he just improves his deep ball slightly, and we talked about a lot last season, I think we even talked about it after the trade happened, Jake, that in year 2 for Josh Allen, they went out and they got him guys who separate very quickly off the line of scrimmage. Yeah. And he was able to, Cole Beasley was a valuable fantasy asset last year. Not because Cole Beasley's a great receiver, but if you need 3 yards to get some space to catch the ball for 8 yards, he can do that. You know who is like the ultimate version of that? Stefon Diggs. No one basically creates more separation outside of vintage Antonio Brown than Stefon Diggs does. And all of a sudden, he can still burn with crisp routes.
Yes.
If Allen just slightly improves the deep ball, this could be a lot of touchdowns.
And that's the thing. So what you're referencing when we talked about on that show, it was the Cam Newton track. It was like they went for Cam Newton and said, we got to get him bigger bodies because he's inaccurate. And they tried the Kelvin Benjamin, Devin Funchess nonsense. And they realized, oh, that's not how you help somebody who has struggles with inaccuracy. You get the guys who get open quicker, who can separate, who can even adjust when the target's thrown a little bit off. And it's not just about, well, they can catch it because their wingspan's so big. No, you get better ability over the middle of the field. I love this fit. You know how I feel about Josh Allen. You know, his inaccuracy is a major concern. Obviously, he's one of the guys, that being Stefon Diggs, who when I do my write-up and I talk about my rankings is like, yes, I go by projections. He fell just outside the top 30. I would take him much earlier than that because what you're saying is I feel like that outside the top 30 is his absolute floor. And I'd be willing to gamble a few spots around earlier on the fact of everything you just said is maybe he turns into Steve Smith's version of Cam Newton with Josh Allen.
How many catches do you have for him in Buffalo?
That's the concern. It's the fact that Josh Allen also doesn't throw for a ton of volume. I only have him for 68 catches right now.
Yeah.
I would go over on that number. I don't think Buffalo's going to be
John Brown and Cole Beasley. There's a lot of options.
There is, but I mean, Josh Allen just made Cole Beasley and John Brown into like decent fantasy assets.
Yeah,
you don't think he can
Brown
do that for Diggs?
Top 20 wide receivers. So I look at Brown and what he did last year, and I see Diggs, and I see higher ceiling, and I see he could definitely.
And how about this? Buffalo's not going to be as good as they were last year. They're just not. They had like the 3rd easiest schedule in the league. The defense played out of its mind. Like, what if they regress a little bit defensively and they have to throw a little bit more?
I'm still a believer that Josh Allen can improve, but that is where I'm struggling a little bit is how many targets are we going to see from Diggs in this offense and how consistent can he be with Josh Allen and how inexperienced he is? Like, we know he's got a deep ball. We know he can run around and
he has a bad deep ball. He's actually great at throwing intermediate routes. He's actually one of the best in the league at that. And that's where Diggs is going to be most of the time.
Where's his touchdown total going to be too? That's the other question.
I think it's going to be high. Unless Josh Allen continues
here I got a Vegas line for you, obviously, because it's 0.5, 24.5 over under.
You say 24.5 touchdowns?
Yeah.
Oh, for Allen.
Oh, I thought you meant Diggs. I was like, Jesus, under.
No, that's where I'm going with this. Is that's the Josh Allen concern for Diggs also is the passing touchdowns.
Sure, but I think that if it's going to funnel through everyone, if it's not Dawson Knox, it's probably going to be Stefon Diggs.
Well, I have 5.7 for Diggs and I have 5.3 for Brown. I actually think they finished pretty close in the touchdown department. Again,
yeah, I think Brown is an absolute wash this year. Like, he's gone.
Okay, and if that's the case, and this is kind of goes back to like the Cowboys conversation, if we kick somebody completely aside from the 3, then yes, Stefon Diggs should finish a lot higher. But you're going to need somebody to completely kind of get pushed aside and bomb this year.
I think he's just going to be a frustrating wide to own.
I don't think so. I think just about how people are scared of DeVante Parker, people are scared to death of Diggs. I'm not.
I do think it's a good fit, like a real life football trade. I think, you know, what Buffalo said is, we
probably gave up a bit much.
Probably
based on
gave
what
up
the market
a bit much,
was
but
like
what they
that
said, that we either draft a wide receiver in the first round or we
trade a first round pick and get Diggs.
We get Diggs, and we're win now, and he's proved himself. But there's a couple like Charek, McLaurin. These are guys that I'd much rather have.
We'll get to those guys. Actually, should we call it now? We'll talk about Deebo, because he's next on this. Then we'll get to the rest of the guys in part 3. 25th overall, pick number 64. Let's take a brief pause for me to tell you that we recorded this well before Deebo Samuel broke his foot. So he's going to be out at least 10 weeks. So the entire section on Deebo Samuel has been rendered inert. We will catch up with the entire 49ers receiving core, plus where you should probably draft Deebo Samuel now with this information in part 3 of the wide receiver preview. Back to the regularly scheduled programming.
Jimmy's too busy throwing shots at porn stars.
Sweet. Would love to be Jimmy.
Sounds like he's
Paid like $30 million
Got his
a
life
year,
together.
living the life,
Yeah.
went to the Super Bowl.
Did you not hear about that like 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah.
Far more handsome than me. Like he's got it going on. Jealous of Jimmy G. Got to bring him down the fantasy rankings a bit.
yeah.
How many more do we have in part 2? Because we still haven't brought up the best one.
I was gonna say that's it for part 2.
We'll start.
No,
strong.
then let's throw one more in part 2 because
Well, we're
we gotta
going
get
in
his name.
we're going in order of the ADP.
Well, screw the ADP.
No, that's the way that we're doing this in order.
You're gonna start strong. Part 3.
Who is it that you wanted to bring up, and we'll tease it for part 3?
Freaking Terry McLaurin.
No, he's not even first up next.
I know.
God.
Yeah, high T. No one has generated worse nicknames than Terry McLaurin.
Terry McLaurin.
People call
He
him.
has one. He has one, Scary Terry from Rick and Morty, but he refuses to use it. So that you actually, maybe that's why you
I
downgrade him.
mean, listen, if you're an incel and you love Rick and Morty, there you go. You can go do that. If you are calling him F1, you're an absolute jabroni. High T.
I hate that one.
You need some high T. Or you just call him Scorin' McLaurin.
I like that.
That's
one.
a much better name. Like,
Yeah.
what are we doing here?
Yes.
They said people can have their accurate projections and be good at fantasy. You want nicknames, you come to Pat Mayo. And we'll get to that. We'll get to high T too. You need to have some high T. Have the guts to play and draft Terry McLaurin. Although it does seem like everyone kind of likes him this year. I'm actually shocked by his ADP where it is right now.
I like him a little bit more. Yeah.
So Chris
Oh,
Meaney,
it'll be top 20 by August.
for sure. Chris Meaney, you can follow him on Twitter at Chris Meaney. You can follow Jake on Twitter at All In Kid. Check him out on The Athletic as well. You can follow me on the Twitter box at the PME, same as Instagram, same as Facebook. Smash the like button for the episode. Tell me which of these guys that we just talked about in this episode that you think have the ability to finish as a top 10, potentially top 5 receiver in 2020 fantasy football drafts. Also subscribe to the audio podcast for the Pat Mayo Experience. Leave a 5-star review. Help me out. It takes like 20 seconds. You don't even need to leave the review. Just go rate it 5 stars on your fucking phone. It takes like 2 seconds. Please go do that. I'm sorry for swearing at you. I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. Part 3 coming soon. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!